Hello and welcome to the season finale of the NYFTSA Open Doors Film Panel Series. I'm Professor Jeffrey Wisotsky and we're coming to you live from the studios of Bronx Community College. It's a great time to be a film student in New York State. Thanks to Governor Cuomo's highly successful production tax credit program, New York's film industry is growing and thriving. And that means new production-related jobs are being created every day. What better way to end this season of Open Doors than with the experts that take motion pictures to the finish line? Today, we're talking to a distinguished panel of post-production professionals who will talk to us about the process of taking your picture to its finished, polished, and final product. Beside me is Yana Collins-Lehman, President and COO of Trevanna Post, specializing in post-production accounting, and Zach Tucker, co-founder and president of Harbor Picture Company, specializing in sound, ADR, and visual effects. I'd like to welcome all of you to the program. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Our film students in the audience and students watching this program online want to know the story of how each of you began your career into film and television. What were some of your first jobs, Yana?
Some of my first jobs were, I started in theater. After college, had a lot of ideas about art. So some friends of mine and I just started a black box theater, which was kind of easy to do because I'm from Northern California, savage little town called Chico. So everything's really cheap. You can just start a theater and do theater. So we did that for 5 years. And then I moved to New York. And my first job it started as an internship. And it was at a film company that is no longer with us called Independent Pictures. Many film companies started in the 90s and spent their money badly and then died, and that was one of those. And then I worked for a lawyer, an entertainment lawyer, who's also a producer. His name is John Sloss. His company is Sloss Law, and he also has a distribution company called Cinetic. And then I went to Trevanna, where I work now. That was 13 years ago.
Great story.
Thanks.
Zach?
So my first job had nothing whatsoever. I worked in oil exploration out of college. Looking for oil out in the Gulf of Mexico. Didn't like it, and went back to graduate school in journalism. And it was in journalism that I really got introduced to post-production and filmmaking and storytelling, documentary storytelling. And from there, I got an internship actually at a post-production company, learning Avid and Premiere, which you guys have probably all learned. And from there, I came back to New York, where I was from, and got involved at a documentary television company where I was doing editorial work. Then I started working more in scripted work and as an assistant editor at a feature film company in New York, down in Soho. And from there, just kept on working much more in the post-production space.
So this is for both of you. What major changes have contributed to the current drivers of the film and TV industry, and what are those drivers today, Yana?
Well, I'll talk about one. I think the two major ones are financial and technological. So I'll talk about the financial, you can talk about the technological. But honestly, tax credits are a major driver of film, television, and feature production because they exist all over the world. So in all cases, when someone is trying to get a project greenlit, the first thing that someone's going to look at is their budget. How much is it going to be? Well, that's probably the second thing they're going to look at. First, is it interesting? Second, is it affordable? And so that's when they look at their budget. And now, budgets are much more attractive to financiers if they are going to be able to receive a tax credit. So we worked on a show that had 6 tax credits. It shot in Canada. It had the production credit in Canada. It had the visual effects credit in Canada. Also shot in Colombia. It had a Colombian tax credit. It had the New York Post tax credit. and I'm leaving off a couple. It also shot in Europe. So many territories all over the world now have tax credits, and that is it's a major driver of whether something is going to get made or not. And that's changed. I mean, that's not how it used to be. You used to just find a company, fundraise. There used to be production, finance, distribution deals. So the same company that produced your show also financed it and also distributed it. But that has all changed. And the financing model and the changes to the financing model, I think, are major drivers of the industry. Technologically.
So on the technology side, I can talk about that a little bit. In fact, the shift in technology that happened in the last 7 or 8 years was really the sort of foundational impetus for starting Harbor, that I started with a couple of partners back in 2010. And the big shift that happened was the transition from analog celluloid film production and acquisition to what you guys are probably mostly into, which is digital acquisition and digital post-production. And what that really did, amongst other things, was really democratize the access to the technology and the tool set so that people could tell stories. And so that it meant that you didn't have to assemble the largest financing from the Hollywood studios to make, for example, an independent feature film. It became much more accessible for storytellers of all walks of life to be able to tell their stories. And that was sort of the inception of Harbor, because Harbor came along and said, now that the tool set is democratized, now it's just about talent and ideas. And that's where Harbor came in and allowed us, on the business side, to compete with the biggest companies in the world that were making film and television shows. And so for us, that's been sort of the most inspiring aspect of what we do, is this idea that with much reduced budgets, and people have access to the tool sets to be able to tell the stories that they want to.
So a little film history I hope you'll both help me with. What were the drivers when all of you started in the film and TV industry? And Yana, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I can start with the life and death of my first job. So there was a time in the late 90s, I feel so old when I say that, when banks were just loaning film production companies just massive amounts of money. They were just extending these insane $100 million credit instruments to them. And so what happened at Independent, it was a brilliant producer named Kerry Woods who introduced us to Alexander Payne. He introduced us to the guys who made Swingers. He was the guy who found all those guys. He made a giant movie, Godzilla. So he was a rising star in independent production. And he got hundreds of millions of dollars, and basically, he wouldn't mind my saying this because he agrees this is what happened. He just overextended. He made a really fancy office in Hollywood and a really fancy office on Bond Street in New York City. Everybody had an Eames chair. And the truth is, movies rarely make money. Very rarely. It is a trick to turn a profit with a movie. Every independent film company at that time had a file on the Blair Witch Project. That was the holy grail. Like, how did they do that? We got to just replicate that. We got to figure out, they just cracked the code at how to make a profit. Anyway, so that's what happened when I was in the film industry. I mean, we could go back to when, it was just studios and actors were employed by the studios and on major contracts. But I think the major shift is that tentpole movies or $100 million budget movies were kind of more the norm. Fewer of them were made, but those were mostly what was made. And the budgets have slowly kind of descended. And the reasons for that are, I think, mostly you can make a movie on your iPhone and cut it on your Mac. Is it going to be any good? Probably not, unless you're just hugely talented, like the Tangerine guy, right? It's very rare. But essentially, that's what studios think. We should be able to make this for not very much money. And so they're just going to cut most of it out of post. We can just get to that later. Yeah, I'm not sure if I totally answered your question,
No,
but that's how it's changed. You can make movies for less money. Everybody is making movies. It used to just be, major studios had all the infrastructure for all of it, to shoot it, to cast it, to edit it. And now what's happening is, because of this idea that anybody can make a movie, which I loved your use of the term democratize, that's true, and that's a very positive aspect of it. Another aspect of it is a lot of people are starting companies and they have no idea what they're doing, like at all. And there are just infinite numbers of them. There are infinite numbers of companies producing content today. And content itself is changing so much, right? It's not about just going and sitting in the theaters and digesting a 2-hour feature film that was a massive budget. We're consuming content in all different ways, in all different time frames, all different budgets. So I would say that there's just more of it. The space is really chaotic. The positive side of that is the opportunity is enormous.
Zach, same question.
I would say to flip more onto the craft side of it, what's really happened is there's also been, it used to be that you worked in commercials, you worked in movies, and maybe you worked in television. And then all the artists that worked on those various genres only did that one thing. I only edit commercials. And even I only edit comedy commercials. And that has really changed, partially because of the technology, partially because of what Yana's talking about of, it's unclear exactly when you say, well, what is a movie, what is a TV show, what is content? Those lines are blurring. But it's also because the technology has allowed us as craft storytellers to be able to play with all sorts of different tools and to cross-pollinate so that when you're working at Harbor and we're doing projects, the cinematographers that we're working with are doing Star Wars and they're doing a Denny's commercial. And the colorists that are on our crew are doing Billions, the TV show, and they're also doing Arrival, the feature film. And so one of the things that's really interesting about that is that especially you guys as up and coming craft artists and directors and producers and editors and colorists, is that means two things. One is that you should have opportunity to work in multiple genres, which is always most interesting. Spend 2 years working on a movie, get that done, it was a crazy experience, 2 weeks on a commercial. So it keeps it fresh. The other thing is it really allows you to do is to work integratedly with other craft artists. It used to be there was a sound house, and those guys just did sound on 42nd Street. Mm-hmm. And then there was a editorial shop that only worked on the editing side, and never the twain shall meet. They didn't really talk and interact with each other. We thought that didn't make any sense. We thought that our creative editors should be literally sitting next to our sound designers, should literally be sitting next to the director, so that they can inform one another. So that means that a simple example of that is, an editor is having a hard time making a cut work. And sometimes the way you make a cut work is not by changing the juxtaposition of images, but some sound design. So if you're trying to have it, what's an example? You're trying to have a character walk into a room, but they didn't get the right coverage. But perhaps sound design comes in and puts some footsteps in. And all of a sudden the cut works. And having those kinds of creative interactions happen between all the disciplines and all the people that are working on the project, from the director to the producer to the editor to the colorist, the visual effects artist, the assistant editor, and have all those people being able to collaborate allows us to push the creative to the next limit, because that's always what we're trying to do. We're always trying to say, hey, we've just done this edit, now what can we do with it? How much further can we push it? And sometimes it's about bringing the assistant editor in who saw all the dailies that the editor didn't get to see, who remembers this shot. And having a playground like that to work in is really how we sort of see the landscape and the way that people are making stories, content, movies, whatever it is they're making these days. And I think that's been a really interesting evolution of what we're doing.
It's funny, this is the last semester that we received the yellow book from MPE.
Oh,
now
okay.
It's all digital, but
Right.
every page is absolutely departmentalized. The editing houses were on this side, the post-sound houses were on this side. So it's great to hear that what you're doing is real. And
Yeah,
it's
if you even look at how we present our work, it used to be, you go to our website and it would say colorists. and over somewhere else it would say sound designers. Now we don't do that. Now we say, here's our work. And if you click on the work and watch the trailer that we did or the spot that we did, we'll tell you what we actually did on it. But we're really interested in like presenting the idea that like we have lots of artists and craftspeople, producers, financiers working together to create what we're trying to do.
And this is a great segue to the first roll-in, because we're going to see two company reels today, and the first one is from Phosphene. And I was hoping you can set this up because your company worked on a lot of projects that's on that reel.
Sure, so I'll set this up a little bit so because Vivian wasn't able to be here today. Phosphene is a very high-end boutique visual effects company based in New York City that works on feature films and television shows. And we collaborate with them often because whereas they specialize in visual effects, we sort of specialize in everything else. You know, we do everything from dailies, creative editorial, color, sound, and delivery. And oftentimes what's happening is we are collaborating with Phosphene and other visual effects artists to execute specific visual effects scenes within the films or the television shows that we're working on. And her reel is a terrific example of what's possible on the visual effects side.
So we're going to roll in the first company reel from Phosphene. Roll the tape. Wow, what a wonderful company reel. Zach, could you talk about, I mean, Phosphene is a New York-based award-winning design and visual effects studio. Could you talk about what Harbor did on like Arrival, Godless, and Marco Polo?
Sure, these are projects that we collaborate with Phosphene on. I can tell you that on Arrival we handled all the color correction. The cinematographer, Bradford Young, who's currently, who just shot the new edition of the new Star Wars edition, Han Solo, was a project. He also shot Arrival, directed by Denis Villeneuve. And this is a project where we were handling the color and all the picture post-production, and Phosphene was handling some of the visual effects shots. I don't think they handled all the visual effects shots in the movie, and that's generally how visual effects works. There might be hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of shots in a visual effects production, and the visual effects supervisor will divvy out those shots to various visual effects vendors who specialize. For example, some specialize in water, some specialize in explosions. Just depends, and that's how that kind of collaboration would happen.
You specialize in water. So that shot that I saw in the Academy Award-winning film *The Shape of Water*, there's a scene on the bus.
Yeah.
There was one company that just specialized in those water drops.
Sure.
That's cool.
Oftentimes, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We have a question from another college. Keith, could you tell us who's calling in?
So this question is coming from Michelle at NYU, and it's for everyone. The question is, are the day production hours in post-production comparable to the average physical production days, like 12 to 14 hours?
Really good question.
What I can tell you on the post-production side is there are certainly 12 to 14 hour days. There's certainly 18-hour days. They're not the norm. Generally, the idea is, there's the chaos of production, and you generally try to come back to post and have a slightly more sane schedule. That being said, there's release dates, there's air dates, and when those are coming up, it's all hands on deck until you deliver the product, because it has to be perfect before it goes on air or releases to 3,000 screens around the world. Generally, we try to keep it more sane than that, but definitely, I would say I'd say anyone that's embarking on a potential career in post-production, it's generally not a 9-to-5 job. That's generally not why people got into it. The folks that tend to get into the production and especially the post-production side are extremely passionate and dedicated and unwilling to accept anything less than the highest level delivery possible. Otherwise, it's probably not the right gig for them. And so, are there 12 and 14-hour days? Yeah. Are there 8-hour days? Sure. It really varies.
But I will answer about post-production accounting, which is a great job to consider. The whole reason that Trevanna is the way that we are is that because we specialize in post-production accounting as opposed to production accounting, also a very interesting job. But in production accounting, you're part of a department that's on location and you are working 14, 16-hour days. And in post-production, from the accounting side, we're able to work on many shows at the same time because the schedules in post-production are more predictable than in production. You're also dealing with fewer human beings. Like in production, you can sometimes have a crew of up to 1,000 people and you've got actors. And so the production vibe is very different from the post-production vibe, generally.
Keith, you have another question coming in?
Yes, I do have another question coming in.
We have another iPad question that's coming in.
So this one is another question for everyone. It's from Emma at Binghamton. And the question is, how difficult is it to fix bad sound in post? My project has background noise that I want to get rid of. Can it be removed?
That's a great question. It's very case by case. And generally the idea is that it depends on is the bad sound over dialogue. For example, if you had planes flying overhead while you were shooting, and there were lines of dialogue, and those lines of dialogue did not happen when the plane was flying over, you can probably more easily cut the plane flying over out of all the background, unless there's dialogue over it. If there's dialogue over it, generally you're going to go into an additional dialogue recording session and re-record the dialogue. And again, generally, it's interesting idea is that a lot of times what you're trying to do, if you have these scenes while you're editing, is that you're connecting. This is a perfect example. Your picture department would be connecting with your sound department during the editorial phase and saying, look, here's how I've cut the scene. Can you tell me what we can do with this? And the dialogue folks, the sound folks would say, let's hear all the takes. Show me all the takes you've got, not just the one that you cut. Because it's possible that when they said the same line in another take, there wasn't a plane flying overhead, and we're able to pull that sound in and put it against the picture take that you like and make it work. And so generally what you're looking for is a really good sound collaboration with your picture team so that the two of them can work together and limit the amount of additional dialogue recording you need to do.
So I have a question. This is for both of you. What training does one need to get a job in post-production? And we'll start with Zach, and then we'll go to the accounting side. So Zach.
when you're getting, when we look at people that we're hiring, who are sort of entry level and getting started, the most important thing we're looking for is intelligence and commitment. We're not necessarily looking for how well do you know how to run Avid, or how well do you know how to grade and resolve. We're really looking for dedicated, smart people who are willing to show up and willing to learn. Is it great if you have some skills? If you know how to use Avid or Premiere, if you're going into the post-production side, it's a serious leg up. I don't want to say that it doesn't matter at all what you know, but it certainly helps. But more, we're looking at, we can train you. And we're looking for people that we can train. We're not looking for people that know everything, because you don't, and are unwilling to jump in and get their hands dirty and learn, take critique, and get better at what they're doing. And so I would say, I would say, more important that you come with an open mind and a willingness to learn and do whatever is required on the job. So folks that come in to do an editing internship and get asked to do something in sound and say, that's not my job, they tend not to last very long. In the whole business, and that it's like that. The whole business is a very collaborative, we're all in it together type of endeavor. And so the folks that come in and say, hey, look, I'm really interested in editing, but if you need me to do something over in the sound, or if you need me to make a run with some videotape or move a drive, whatever you need me to do, those are the folks we're looking for.
Are there any employees at Harbor that started in the mailroom?
I would say, not only started in the mailroom, I would say a quarter of our 100 employees, if not 35, 40%, started as interns. And they have moved up inside. We always try to promote within the company. And they're now in management positions, they're in art positions, they're in craft positions. And so I think it's an undeniably excellent way to get, to come up in the business, to come into an internship or an entry-level gig, especially because it also really allows you to find out not just, what specific discipline might I want to specialize in, but what company do I want to be at? I think it's really important. You're going to do a lot. You're going to have a long career in this, and you may even shift what you specialize in. But I think it's extremely important that you find a place that you like the culture. We think of what we do as 50% art and execution, and the other 50% culture. And I think it's really important, and that's why internships are nice, because you do 2 or 3 months somewhere. Is that a place I want to stay? Or is it a place that's not the right vibe for me? I want to go somewhere else.
But if I could add, I learned everything I know from someone else who was doing it before me, and I'll say the same thing about Zach, and I'll say the same thing about every post-production professional in the industry. This is a very apprentice-based industry. It has been from the very beginning. What you can learn in film school is a lot of things, but one of the most important things is how to work with each other. That's really the most important thing. The rest of it, you're going to be taught by the person, and hopefully you can identify the person who you admire and you want to emulate, and they're going to teach you everything that they know. And that's still the way it is in the industry, kind of amazingly. There actually is a level in the post-production editorial union. There's editor, assistant editor, and apprentice. So, unfortunately, they're not budgeted all that much anymore. We're working on that. We're really trying to get apprenticeships back in film and television budgets. But that's the way I would say, 70% of the editors we've ever met started as they were apprentices. So I say that because it's important to have a great experience in school, but know that it's okay, because someone's going to teach you the rest of what you need to know. And that's how all of us got our jobs.
Well, we're about to do the second roll-in, and this roll-in is the company show reel for Harbor Picture Company. So Zach, could you set it up before we roll in?
Sure, I'll give you a quick
the
intro.
Company reel.
Harbor is unique in that it works across the feature film world, television world, episodic, Netflix, Amazon, etc., and the commercial advertising world. And across the genres, it also does dailies, editorial, visual effects, color correction, sound design, mix, and delivery. So what you'll see on this reel is a mix of all genres and a mix of all disciplines that we worked on. We won't have done all of those facets on every single one of the clips that you'll see, but we've done something or multiple disciplines on everything that you'll see.
Okay, so let's roll in the Harbor Picture Company show reel. Roll tape.
That's a proper introduction.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Wow. Zach, what a great company show reel. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the projects that Harbor worked on the reel?
Sure. One thing I can say, picking up from where we left off, is that a significant number of the projects worked on in there in terms of the sound design, the mix, were accomplished by people that 3 or 4 years ago were interning at Harbor. And because part of what, to pick up a little bit on what Yana was talking about, is that, you know, in film school and stuff like that, you may learn how to use Avid. You may learn how to shoot. You may learn how to use the tool set, but you may not know what to do with it. And what we do a lot at Harbor is have very senior veteran artists sitting with the junior talent that we're bringing up and saying, this is why we should grade it like this. This is why we're mixing the dialogue low here. This is why I cut this image next to this image. And so a lot of what you'll see in there, what you catch out of the reel, is it gives you an idea of the range of stuff that you can do and the range of disciplines that you can get involved in, and the types of projects that are coming through all the time.
So before we take some questions from the studio audience, I have one more question for you, Zach. And sure. On your website, you mentioned, quote, that great stories can be told at any length and can live anywhere, unquote. Can you give us an example of a recent project that was the most challenging for your company?
Sure. We're doing a project right now, pretty significant scale feature film that sort of similar to what Yana was mentioning. He's shooting in Hawaii, Colombia, California, and probably several other places. And the challenge there, right, is how do we, and we're involved in the production and the post-production on that project. And two of the guys that we have sent to Hawaii to work on the project started as interns, and they've really come up through the ranks. And the big challenge there is how do we maintain the data and color pipeline in multiple regions around the world, have real-time access to it, and keep it secure. You can imagine a big thing that you guys will start to get into is, you know, security is a big deal, right? You guys have all heard about different companies being hacked and content getting out. You know, the IP, the stuff that we work on, is our lifeblood. It's the only thing we have that's got value, right? And so when that gets out, it's problematic. And so we're shooting a project remotely, very high resolution. You guys know, high resolution files are heavy, they're big, they're not easy to move around. And so how do you secure them? How do you transport them? How do you make sure that the metadata, and you guys know about metadata, all the time code and all this sort of information that's on there, how do you make sure that that stays intact so that when you get down to the finishing process later on, you have the right information? And most importantly, how do you have all of the craftspeople and artists and producers and executives who are in Hollywood, in Hawaii, in New York, and all these different places, how do you get them access to the daily footage that you're shooting so they can see it and contribute to it and course correct if things aren't going well? And so that's a real interesting, the problem solving in there, it took 4 or 5 months to design the workflow. Interaction between the producers, the studio, Harbor's technologists, artists, and trying to create a pipeline that allows all that stuff to happen, and most importantly, to happen so that no one knows it's happening. Because the last thing you want to do is create a lot of heavy infrastructure that gets in the way of what's the most important thing that we're doing, which is the creative process. You want the director to be able to see what he's doing instantaneously and not have to think about all the stuff that went in behind the scenes to make that happen and still be secure and still have high fidelity. How's that?
Well, we've come a long way. I mean, my dad, who used to live in the Bronx, used to, as a teenager, would move 35 millimeter films from the Loewy's Paradise to the Valentine Theater. And in those days, you just worried about what would happen to the print during a few blocks.
Yeah.
So now you got to worry about a lot more things. Okay, so we're going to take questions from the studio audience. I saw a hand go up. Yes, nice and loud. Tell us your full name and where you're from.
Hello, my name is Hipatia Cruzeta. I'm from the Bronx. My question is for everyone. If I'm interested in entering your company, do I have to be enrolled in a 3-credit BCC Media internship, or can I volunteer during the summer to enter your company?
Very proud to answer this question. You don't have to be enrolled, and you don't have to volunteer. You can't volunteer. You will be paid to be an intern if you're interested in any of the companies in post-production. There was a big lawsuit several years ago. We just refer to it as the Black Swan lawsuit, and that ended free internships. So they're just not out there.
And how about with you, Zach?
Yeah, it's great if you're enrolled in school. It helps on the credit side. You do not have to volunteer. But I think the real thing to think about is, if you're, let's say you've had post-production training or you've had production training, whatever it is, when you come in, most likely you won't be doing that. You will have access to it, and you will sit in on sessions, but part of it's a two-way street. We want to teach you a lot and have you think it's a good experience and it's enriching, but we're working with you, so you may also be doing things that seem not post-production related. Client services, making a run to one of the other shops that we work with, being involved in the daily operation of the place. And so I think part of it is, come in and get interviewed and see if it's a place that you like, but also come in with the attitude of your goal is to get a feel for what goes on in this industry, because you may not yet know exactly what you're interested in. You may think, I love editing, and you get in there, you're like, guess what, actually, I really love sound design. And what you really want to do is come in and be a place where everyone wants you in their suite. You want to talk to one of our senior colors and him be like, I wish you would come in and sit in with me today. And if you're the person that does that and is open to it, you'll get an enormous amount out of it. If you're the person that no one wants in there and is talking too much during the session or texting too much and stuff like that, you're not going to get anything out of it. We'll love to have you around because you're a good person, but you won't get anything out of it, and we want you to get a lot out of it.
By the way, we've had representatives from Local 52, and if you're texting on the set, you're off the set.
Yeah.
So.
Can I say a
Yes,
quick little
please,
anecdote
absolutely.
about my trajectory? So I was in grad school at Columbia for arts administration, and I saw a movie called Gummo by Harmony Korine, and I just couldn't believe that someone would make that movie. It just astonished me. And I waited and watched the credits and saw that it was made by Independent Pictures, and I just emailed them. I basically just had to be there. I was just possessed. And so that's when there were free internships. So I threw myself at their mercy and got an internship, and I was on the production side. I thought I wanted to be a producer. I thought I wanted to make movies just like Harmony's movies. And I kept listening to the CFO on the other side, and it just occurred to me after a few months, like, that's where it's all really going on. I want to be over there in business affairs where they're like deciding about the money. And it was just an imperceptible shift that I never would have learned about myself had I not been in that insane environment. And I'll tell you, at the pizza reception, some of the stuff I did as an intern, which was just bizarre. Late 90s were a strange time. But anyway, so to Zach's point, I mean, that was my experience exactly. And then my trajectory went from, business affairs into the finance side of things, where I'm very happy.
Yeah, I think to pick up a little bit on that too, when you come in to interview for the internship, it's helpful to know something about us. If someone will say, so why are you interested in Harbor? And you're like, I don't know, you have a nice address. Okay, which happens. I like working in Harbor. The folks that come in, that they don't have to know a lot, but the folks that come in and say, I went on your website, you guys do really interesting independent film. I love some of the movies you did. I love that Olay spot that you did. Anything says, okay, this person's paying attention. Because part of what happens when you're, at our company, and I'm sure this is true at other companies as well, you're part of the place, right? We have 200 or 300 clients in our studios every day. And so you represent us. So we want people around that we want to hang out with and that have good energy and are interested and engaged and want to be there. And so when someone walks in and says, hey, I heard you guys did Godless. I love that show. I'm so cool. I'd love to work with someone who did that. You're in. It doesn't take much, but it takes a little bit of,
a little bit of research really goes a long way. Yeah. And when I hire, this is the same thing. I look at your resume, kind of, but mostly I just want to have a conversation, because I'm going to spend, and I say this, I'm going to spend more time with you than I spend with my own children. So you're going to have to be fun to hang out with. You got to be funny. You got to be good to talk to. And then, we get more into it. So what I tell people at your guys' level, it's really important, you're interviewing them too. You're not just there to be interviewed. This is the place where you're going to spend your time. So you need to come with some questions is this where I want to commute to and spend time where I could, that I could be spending anywhere? It's really important to find the fit. So be yourself. I mean, I get a lot of resumes where people are like, best interview ever, where I was like, so why do you think you want to do accounting? And what are you into? When you're outside of here, he's like, I love movies, and my favorite movie was The Accountant. I applaud your effort, but this is feeling a little forced to me. So it's really important to bring yourself. You will appear anyway. The person you are in the interview, if it's a different person than shows up on Monday, it's just not good for you and it's not good for them. So just bring who you are. It's really crucial.
And we're going to take some more questions from the studio audience. We have a question. We'll go here. Yes, first and last name. Take the microphone. And where school you're from?
Hello, my name is Itala Watson. I'm from the Bronx, from Bronx Community College also. I was wondering, how would somebody go about getting an internship at your companies? Is there a link online, or how would we go about it?
Well, I'll take this opportunity to mention the Post New York Alliance, which a lot of prestigious post-production companies are a member of. The website is postnewyork.org. And we were very careful to design the website to be very pretty and easy to use. I call it the Hale and Hearty soups of post-production. You can very easily find any of our companies. And so if you want to get a hold of anyone at the companies and tell them you're interested in an internship, you can let them know that the college that you're from and that we have a partnership with your college, and get in the door that way.
Great. And we have another question. Yes. First and last name. Let's get the mic in the back.
Hello. My name is Zainin Lindsay. I'm a graduate from Bronx Community College. I'm also attending City College. This question is for Zach. Saw your reel. It's beautiful. I guess we just wanted to know, like, if you could share with us, like, how much money, like, film, TV shows spend on a special shot like that, and could you give us an example on how you figure out how much to charge for your work, and do you have a rate card for your services?
Great questions. Great questions. On the visual effects side, the quick answer to that is, grossly speaking, we break down visual effects into two categories. There's sort of cleanup, fix-it work. Oh, there was a boom in the shot, or there was something happened in the camera. There's a digital problem in the camera. We have to fix it. We bill that by the hour, generally. Then there's the more creative visual effects side. Some of the stuff you saw in Phosphene's reel, where they're replacing backgrounds and set extensions and that sort of stuff, and that generally gets bid on a shot-by-shot basis. So the visual effects producer will sit down and look at the shot and do a breakdown of the script and breakdown of specific scenes based on the shot lists that are required. Like, hey, we need to turn modern 42nd Street into 1970s 42nd Street, and do a real breakdown of the complexity of the shot. Is the camera going to be locked, or is the camera moving? Because you can imagine it has a very different complexity in terms of what's going to have to be required. How long is the shot? Is it 10 seconds or is it 40 seconds? Because you got to figure that, if you think about certain kinds of visual effects, it's frame by frame. So 24 frames a second. So you can imagine 24 frames can be less expensive than 3 seconds or 4 seconds, which is, multiply that by 24 per second, right? So that's how we figure out the budget of the shots. And those change. And so you can imagine that what happens is we budget the shot and we execute it, and then the director says, actually, you know what? I need the dolly on this shot. Or the director says, you know what, and then the one we're using there, the example, I don't want the marquee to say that movie, I want it to say another movie. And now we have to rebudget the shot. And so it's a very iterative process all the way through until the end, until you get to completion. What was the other question?
Rate card.
The other question was, so it was like, how much do you charge for your work? Or like, do you have a rate card for services? I think you pretty much hit everything.
Well, there's other services besides visual effects. We do have rate cards for everything that we do. But the one thing that plays with that is that, we are in a creative endeavor, and it matters to us the projects that we're working on. And so we work on projects that are very low budget. Let's take on the feature film side, for example, very low budget independent feature films. We've done movies for feature films that have sold at Tribeca for $50,000, start to finish. And we've done, very big, tentpole feature films that Ron Howard directs, for example, right? And so we have a rate card, but we also adjust the rate card to some extent based upon the work that's required and the budget of the project, because sometimes there's a project we really want to work on, but they don't have enough budget to meet our rate card. We'll try to figure out how to make it work and try to make it up on the next one that's got some more budget.
We'll take one more question from the studio audience. Do we have another question? Raise your hand. Okay. You do. Okay. First and last name, and tell us what school you're from.
My name is Janepsi Morales, and this is for Zach. So we know that you had directed a few films. Are you thinking of staying in Harvard Picture or doing both directing and what?
Great question.
Yeah.
Great question. I came up as an editor and director, and And since 2012, I have not been sitting in the chair directing. I've been running the company, which I love. And for me, it suits me very well. I think running the company is a very creative process. And so for now, I'm good where I'm at. Down the road, we'll see. I have a couple of feature film projects that are in the hopper that perhaps down the road I'll get back into, but for now, I'm staying where I'm at. Yeah, good question.
Okay, so this is a question for both of you. Looking back on the beginnings of your journey, is there anything that you would have done differently? Yana, we'll start with you.
I'm not sure I would have done anything differently, but I would have been less anxious, less insecure, less worried about everything, less jealous of people who were further along than me, less fearful that I was never going to get where I wanted to be, less freaked out that I didn't know where I wanted to be. I would have been more present in the experience, because looking back, I have great stories. My path is very random, but I've made so many friends, and I have no regrets. I guess it's just that I just try to remind people, just, be confident. You have everything that it takes to execute your vision. It's just figuring it out. And you don't have to figure it out alone. That's the thing about this field, is that it's totally collaborative. I mean, if you want to see a movie that was written by, directed by, edited by, starring the same person, it's going to be unwatchable. Everything we do, we're doing together. So yeah, I would have just stressed out a lot less.
Okay. How about you, Zach?
I got two responses to that. One is, as we talked about a second ago, I came up early as an editor, and because I was at a particular moment in technology, when technology had really shifted, I learned the technology quickly and was quickly catapulted to a relatively senior editor. That was not good. And the reason why I talk a little bit about it is that I could have been a much better editor if I'd really gone through the apprenticeship track and not tried to, I didn't know I was going too fast, but I did go too fast. And I didn't get to learn from serious veteran industry editors who really knew how to put movies together and craft things in such a way that are the most emotional way to put stuff together. And so I would often run into, when I would have challenging projects, I would often run into real obstacles because I didn't have that training. And so I guess the advice on that side is, take your time. You have a long run. You have a really long run at this thing if you're going to stay in it. And the folks I've found that have come up through Harbor in a much more apprenticed way have really built a foundation that allows them both to have a real approach to tackling difficult creative problems, and they also have a platform and a network to reach out to other people when they get stuck, right? When they get stuck. And and I think getting stuck is a fascinating place to be, because you've pushed it as far as you can, and we work in a world and a network, if you built it right, where you can reach out to other people. And that collaboration, 1 + 1 = 3, is a really inspiring place to be. That's the magic of what we do. So that's the one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is do not be afraid of failure. If you don't fail, you will not succeed. That's what I would say. And I think there's been times when I've been afraid of failure, and I should have said, hang it out there. And it would have been more interesting, because we, in the last 4 or 5 years of our company, I have failed dramatically multiple times. And I think that's the only reason why we're still standing, is because we've failed, pivoted, and come back again, and really tried to learn from where we came up short. And we've come up short multiple times. And we're still standing. And I think part of that is because we don't run away from those moments. As soon as we have failure at our company, we get everyone in the room, and immediately, it's not a blame game, who messed up or what the problem was. It's, why did we go down that path? What was our thinking there? And how can we use that the next time? And that's made it for a very sort of intriguing and constantly creative and engaging process, which I think is what we're all looking for.
So this is a question for both of you. Have you worked in other locations besides New York, and what were your impressions? And Yana, we'll start with you.
Yana.
You know what I'm going to say? I have 2 offices. I have an office in New York and I have an office in LA. And my impression of Los Angeles is that it's just really slow. We do the same thing in New York as we do in LA. And my theory is that because you were in so much traffic on your way to our LA office, your soul was just drained out of you. And so by the time you get there, it's just slow. And so people in California are like, no, we're just laid back. And that's an excuse. They're just slow. And it's just not the same kinetic, like frenzied hum of activity that there is in New York. So did I give you that question? Because it's like my favorite answer.
You want to add to that, Zach? Have you worked exclusively?
Like we work all over the world on various kinds of projects. Definitely, there's different cultural approaches wherever you're working. What I would say is like we're always going after talent and trying to find the best talent wherever they are, anywhere in the world, and figuring out how to collaborate with them. And we've met terrific, hardworking people in every place we've been, and we've also met not terrific, hardworking people in every place we've been. And I think that ultimately this is a collaborative game. That's this kind of business, and so we really try to find people to work with that have sort of three pillars. Do they have a real skill set? Are they good at something that they can bring to the table that elevate our game? 2, will they show up? Are they hardworking, like diligent people? And that's comes out of being in New York. Maybe like we work hard. That's for sure. And the third part is, are they good people? Are they kindred spirits that we feel like will collaborate with us? Because the creative process is about risk taking, right? And if you don't feel that you're with a group of people that you can fail in front of and try things in front of because they're going to come down on you, or it's about ego, you won't be able to do your best work. And so we're always looking for all those 3 things. And probably the most important one is like, are these people that are good kindred spirits that I'm going to feel like I'm in a place where I can create with and take a risk with?
But we tend to find those people in New York easier and faster than we find them in Los Angeles, where I have to fly and hire and fire constantly. And in New York, it's, the people just stay.
So I have another question for both of you. And Yana, if you can respond to this first. Do you think about diversity when you hire, and any specific policies you adhere to, or formally or informally?
I think about it a ton, and I have a pretty informal my company is a boutique company, so policy is like I'm working on it, but a lot of it just comes from here and from here. But I will say, when I'm hiring, it's a massive consideration of mine. I'm hiring now. I cast as wide a net as possible to as many schools as I possibly can, and truthfully, I'm looking for the most qualified person every time. If there are 2 people and they're both equally qualified, and one is from an ethnically diverse background and one is not, I will hire the ethnically diverse person every time.
Zach?
That has been my policy.
Yeah, I mean, we quite strenuously strive to have as diverse socioeconomically, ethnically, geographically staff as possible. Mostly because it's part of who we are, but also because we think that's where the best work comes from. We want people that are challenging the way everyone else sees everything, because that's where the most unique work comes out of. Even if it's on the commercial side of things, we want people that have unique perspectives, and that's what we bring to the table, right? Anybody can learn to push the buttons. We want to know people. We are trying to find the people that can push the buttons in the most interesting way, right? And so it is a significant part of our hiring and staffing process to look across all the groups.
What we don't have at Trevanna is gender diversity. We have 15 people, and 2 of them are men.
It's not cool. It's not cool.
Just saying.
So, last question before we take one more question from the studio audience. And again, this is for both of you. What are the biggest threats to the post-production industry here in New York? And we'll start with Zach.
Look, we can always talk about financial pressures. Those exist all over the place, and so we're constantly dealing with that, because post-production requires real heavy infrastructure and scale. We cover 75,000 square feet of space in Soho. You can imagine what that does to your head every night when you're sleeping. But actually, I would say the real threat is we're constantly looking for more talented people. Like, There's a bigger pool in Los Angeles, to be honest with you. There's just more people out there that have been in the business longer, and it's a bigger breadth. And so like, we're in New York, we are constantly looking for the next talent, whether it's editing talent, it could be IT talent, because IT and media is not the same thing as IT and banking. We're short there. We'd hire 20 people like that if we could. I'm exaggerating, but I'm serious. Avid techs, people that are interested in the technology side of content creation, can't find them. And we're having to train them up all the time, and that's fine, but we're looking for that. So I would say like talent across all the sound design, sound and colorists, all that stuff. It's a talent business and a technology business and a producing business, and like we're based on people. So like for us, the challenge is always, can we find good people that will show up and bring something to the table?
So if I can expand on that with my answer, because I agree, the first thing that comes into my head whenever someone says what's the threat to the post-production industry in New York is Atlanta. I just am afraid of Atlanta because they have an insane tax credit. They just incentivize everything. I'm not saying it's better than ours, it's different than ours. They just you get the tax credit on like every single executive producer first class flights, bank interest, right? It's not a good credit. I don't know how it stays solvent, but Atlanta, because real estate in New York is very expensive, and as Zach said, in post-production we have infrastructure. We have year-round leases. We have 10-year leases that we're paying for. And as we expand, that expense gets larger and larger and larger and larger. So when we made the tax credit, we knew that the threats were going to be, we're going to get a lot of work, which is great. Are we going to be ready for the work? And what do we need to be ready for the work? We need space, and space is expensive. So eventually, will we be able to afford all the space that we need? Threat number one. And threat number two, and this is legitimate and true, is will we have the people to do all the jobs? Which is why we're very earnest and authentic about trying to create workforce pipelines. And the first step is just telling people that there are jobs in post-production and like give post-production a second thought. I know a lot of people just, want to write and direct and produce their dreams, but everything really happens in post. That's where you're going to really make your movies in post-production.
Which brings me to the last question. I know you spoke a little bit about Post-New York Alliance, but can a student join? How many members do you have? Just a little closing on what Post-Alliance New York is.
Yeah, the Post-New York Alliance was founded in December of 2009 for the express purpose of getting a post-only credit in New York State. So there was a very successful production credit, but those of us in post-production felt like we could bring even more jobs here if we could attract the jobs that didn't shoot in New York for whatever reason, but would consider coming here to do post. And when I think about how naive we were in 2010 when we were lobbying for this thing, and we just were thinking like if we could just get like 2% of what LA has, we will be flush. It will be crazy here. Well, it was way more successful than we thought it would be. And the Alliance started as kind of a political entity and has since become it's gone from 14 company members. We now have 66 company members from all over the state of New York and over 700 individual members. And we extend complimentary one-year memberships to interested CUNY students. Anyone interested, we can offer you a free one-year membership to come to all of our events. We have tons of seminars, technological events, informational events. One of the biggest questions we get is how do I become an assistant editor? So we now have like regular storytelling sessions where we get a bunch of editors to come and talk about their journeys. Trevanna, my company, does a quarterly Ask Us Anything where you're invited to come and ask us anything about finances.
It's a great way to meet people in the business.
Yes.
You walk into these meetings, there's 100 people there that work as professionals and hire people.
Right.
So,
and there's a lot of volunteer opportunities to volunteer at our events. That's a great way to get face time with all of us. So what it's become, we still do a lot of lobbying, and that's a whole other thing. But we do tons of education, tons of outreach to students, and
Well,
it's a great organization.
And again,
Very proud
it's
of it.
easily accessible, and
Very
there's a lot of
accessible.
events that you can attend throughout the year for students.
Whether
Well,
you're a member or
not,
a
you
lot
can
of them are
still
open
attend.
to non-members as well.
So our time today has come to an end, and we'd like to thank our distinguished panelists for taking the time to talk to us today. What an insightful conversation. I'd also like to thank the New York Governor's Office of Motion Picture and Television Development, the New York Production Alliance, the New York Film and Television Student Alliance, and our student television crew from the Media and Digital Film Club at Bronx Community College. See you next time on Open Doors. Thank you. Okay,